Hi, welcome back to Divine Ethereal Beings, another podcast episode that I am running tad late on this time. Um, this is for the energy update for March, even though today is technically March 11/30. The first little bit of March sort of got away from me, and all of a sudden I was like, "Hey, wait a second, I haven't done this yet." But it's been really interesting this month, and then kind of in a continuation into a little bit of April as well. It, I'll do my best to explain what I have sort of been brought to, as some themes, as sort of a few things that seem to be happening right now. I can't say that I'll have all the exact words, but I'll do my best to try and describe this because I have to admit this is probably something that I have never quite felt to this degree. And so it was really when I'm sitting here trying to tap into this and trying to figure out like what exactly is kind of going on this month? I felt like I was sort of being pulled in two different directions, and I thought, well, that's really interesting. And the more I started to realize, the more I started sitting with it, the more clarity I started to gain. When I started asking some simpler questions and trying to put some things into context, all of a sudden I started to come into a deep recognition that new earth, old earth kind of feeling. It's not just an idea anymore. It's not just happening in the energetics anymore. It's an actual split that's actually really starting to take effect now. And that's actually a part of what I was feeling. And that's part of the reason why I was feeling like I was sort of being pulled in two different directions. And these directions did kind of feel almost polar opposite to each other. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And also was somewhat confusing me at first because I thought, okay, like how could that be? I'm thinking duality. I'm thinking of through these different things. I'm trying to find the right words that are going to resonate. And yeah, so it took me a little bit before I was kind of starting to land on something, and now I feel obviously enough with it to hopefully relay that here. I did end up actually pulling some cards as well because I just felt like cards might be more helpful in wording and just sort of giving a little bit more of a visual. So maybe if you're not as much of a feeler, you're sort of more of a visual or trying to, find what resonates best for you. Sometimes I find the cards can be really helpful in that as well. So we did pull a few cards. Well, I didn't pull a few cards. They flew out of the deck because I was asking from my team for some help here to get these things sort of sorted that make a little bit more sense. Logically, yes, but well, I can't say it's going to ever make sense logically. I can't say that. That's not true because it doesn't ever make sense logically, but it will as sort of time starts to roll on or you start kind of thinking back on a few things. So I'm going to do another podcast episode as well, and that will be released next week because I think I do need to feel the need to dive into a little bit more of like older, new earth. Some of the talk that was being had, sort of how that is starting to really portray now, because I think that might help with some understanding of what's actually kind of going on at this point on Earth, because we're in it. This is not where we just change our mind and we go in a different direction. That's just not what's going to happen here. So this month of March has been interesting in the factor as well, because the more I started thinking about this split in this energy, I really started to see both sides of that energy portraying in different ways for different people. So that was also really fascinating to kind of recognize. Now, the split is kind of going, the first card that came out for like sort of the one side of the split was cracked open. Rock bottom, surrender to the alchemy of life. That's no joke. I mean, I've had a few people reach out to me in crisis mode, and I'm not the only one. I was talking with another friend the other day, and she was, she's a reader intuitive as well. She's like, yeah, it just seems to be like, one side or the other kind of deal right now. And I was like, yeah, that's how I've, been seeing people kind of approach it, just depending on what's going on in their life. But that cracked open is a real deal, man. Like that is I know everybody's like, well, I thought 25 energy was supposed to be that. I thought it was a shedding. I thought it was a snake. All the things. I'm like, yes, it was. But you got to think about the snake sort of bringing everything to the surface and moving the things that aren't, suiting necessarily. But if we were resisting that to any degree or, weren't really paying attention maybe, and just sort of put it on the back burner, the horse is now coming through and really cracking the whip and saying, look, we really can't carry certain things forward, or these really, there's certain lessons or stuff that needs to be learned before the year can continue. Um, Moving you in a direction maybe that would be more preferable, but of course it's not going to feel like that right now. If you've got things happening that you're just like begging to think, oh God, it's going to be another year of 2025. Well, it's not, but it might feel like that, and I can understand why. And this is part of where that old Earth, new Earth sort of detailing is coming in because that split between energy. If you choose to stay on old Earth, then you're going to continue to, be living in these different states that are probably more resistant compared to quote unquote new Earth, which is the new energy of expansion, self-acceptance, responsibility of self, awareness, these presence, these things that are going to move us forward in a very different way that creates a very different reality. Like I said, I'll do a different podcast episode that'll be released next week, about this exact thing because it is sort of touching on some stuff that maybe hopefully will help decipher sort of what's going to continue to happen here. So then the other side of the path is sort of more where I find those people that are getting really creative, or they're getting really excited, or they feel really hopeful, or they feel really expansive right now. And I started giggling because as I'm thinking of this other side of the path, waiting for the card to come flying out, the next card that came out with that was called, which is soul gifts and training, and it's time to step up. So that's sort of the other quote unquote side of the wall or side of the window. I want to call it a window because we can still see through the window. But I know way back in 25, at certain points, I was starting to already talk about the train splitting, where it felt like we could kind of see each other on these different trains and be able to flip flop quite easily, or somewhat get deterred or pulled back around in some different states of being or lower states of being of self. That's pretty hard to do now because the split is so large now that it's going to take a conscious mind to be like, I'm done with my shit. You know what I mean? So it's not that you can't flip flop, but I'm kind of saying like once you've gotten awareness and once you've sort of got your foundation settling, um, this new earth energy is going to just naturally be where you're sort of driving towards. It just feels better. Who wouldn't want to go towards that? But to get there, we need awareness and the self-acceptance and to be able to feel and deal with what we need to deal with, or whatever our reactions are, instead of just allowing ourselves to react, to actually respond, because that gives you your power back. And that's the most important step here, that some people may be feeling rather challenged at the moment. But I really urge you to really look at that and be like, okay, well, this is happening for a reason. Um, and really start just kind of analyzing what that is for yourself so that you can really start to move towards some of that expansive energy because it's here. It's just, again, it's about kind of who and where and what had the awareness of it, who and where and what was not resisting, what was trying to leave or what was trying to go or move. And allowing for that space of expansion to really take place, but that takes a lot of trust. And it does, it takes a lot of trust. And trust is not always the most easy thing to come by, but when you start to do it, it does become easier and easier. So the other card that actually flew out with the second card, which was the called one, was trust the timing, which was trust the wave you came in on. Time is not running out. And I think that's a really important one for no matter which side you might feel like you're sort of floating in right now, old Earth, new Earth, that this is something that you recognize because time itself is changing. We created it to be something very constrictive, from our conscious mindset of the 3D. And yet it is just not even true to the actual form of what time even is. So there's this weird feeling sort of that's kind of can be really challenging around time as well, and that's starting to kind of emerge a bit more throughout March as we continue in this direction. So there's a lot here, like a lot. Again, like I said, this is just going to start. This is a building block. This is sort of where we're starting, and then from here it's just going to build. And again, it's not, I don't actually like to say the word bad when it comes to any of this because I don't think anything about this is bad. People make bad decisions, but I don't feel like energy is necessarily bad, right? It just is what it is. And it's, they just reminded me of something too. They said, remember, nothing in your world means anything until someone assigns a meaning. And I think that's a really the good thing to keep on top of mind as this energy moves forward, because we always will have choice of which earth you want to ride on. And it doesn't mean it gets to be a hard thing to deal with when you're, stretching into the new earth space. But what becomes hard to deal with is sort of this feeling of lost. And that's what they kind of keep talking about. So many of you think you're lost right now and you're just not. But to the conceptualize of what we only know as human is so limited. And so it's hard for the brain to not want to assign stories and being like, well, we're lost, we're alone, we don't know where we're going, we're a failure, we're doing all these things wrong, this isn't working out, my expectations aren't being met. And it's funny because they just said to me again that word expectations is detrimental to where we're headed. And it is one things that will keep you in old earth energy. Because if you cannot allow yourself to expand beyond your own expectations, you will limit yourself every single time and you will keep yourself in an old energy. So now they're like, people are going to be wondering, like, how the hell do you get out of that then, if that's where you're finding yourself in this moment? I, you know, they gave me some more cards from my other deck too, because they were trying to help for some deciphering of exactly that. Like, how do I get myself out of it? How do I move this energy? How do I expand into more of that new earth energy? And the first one that came out was benefactor, which is grace and generosity. And they mean that on such a large capacity, and it's not even just about ourselves, you know, give yourself grace and generosity can be extremely hard for certain people, and I totally understand that, but maybe that's part of what you need to explore, right? Um, but it's not even just about giving that to ourselves and treating ourselves in that aspect with that love and that compassion, but to start really doing that with others too. You know, we are here together. And I know there's a lot going on in the world. I know there's a lot of fear. I know there's a lot of things happening. Don't get me wrong. I'm not naive. I see and understand, but I also see a very different perspective, and I choose to hold that because in that energy and perspective that I choose to hold is way more fucking empowering than trying to, you know, wrap my head around the fear or why or what's the point. You know, it's never going to make sense. But what you can make sense of is the energy behind everything. So, you know, that grace and generosity and like just having that compassion for other people rather than just seeing so much division that's trying to be pushed across. And I'm not saying you got to go have like you know, hippie moment on top of the hills yelling this from the rooftops. But it's even just in the simple acts. Like I went to the city the other day. There was a man sitting outside with a sign. He was homeless. And to see that in this city is this one that I've gone to is it used to be very rare. You never saw it. It's a smaller city. You never really saw much of that ever happening because it was smaller. And to see that actually broke my heart the other day because I thought, and I could tell by this man, it took everything in him. It was a very vulnerable moment for him to even put out a sign asking for some change because he was now homeless. And I could tell that it took so much vulnerability for him to do that because I don't know if it was more recent or whatever his story was. I didn't ask, but I knew that it took everything in that man to let go of that part of his ego to say he needed help. And it just well brought a tear to my face because I watched so many people walk by this guy like he didn't even exist, you know, and he was sitting only feet away from the front doors of the store. And it hurt me to recognize how many people just would walk by him, but then I chose again not to get sucked into that energy because I thought that's old earth energy. And I want to see if we can't switch that around. So I didn't have any cash on me at the point in time. Because I was walking into the store when I saw him, obviously. So I went and got what I needed, and then I went back to my car, and I knew I had a bit of cash in my car, and I wanted to give him the money. And so I went back to give him the money, and there was another lady now standing there with her daughter, and I had given him a few groceries and was talking to him. And so I quietly just handed him the cash, and he was going to say no. He was going to tell me it was too much. And I told him, I said, no, absolutely not. You take that. And so he, you know, very, very graciously said thank you. And then I just slipped away and he continued to talk to the lady. But you know what was the most beautiful thing is after I saw that lady there, it was that instantaneous shift of perspective of being like, hey, it doesn't have to be like that. I believe that will be people that will come together and start to help this man in his most vulnerable moment. And it did. It did before I even got back there, right? So then I left, and as I'm leaving the parking lot, I see another guy who sat down with him, another lady that had come and given him something now. So it's again, it can be done in the moment as well, right? I guess that's the whole point of them wanting me to tell you that story because it can be done in the moment. It doesn't need to be this big thing of being like, oh man, I feel like I'm stuck here. I feel like I'm stuck in this energy. It can be fast. I mean, we are in the year of a horse. A horse will move real quick if you've got intentional pieces, but it's also asking you to be vulnerable with yourself and with that energy of expansion because it's a co-creation. Okay. Co-creation. Big, big word for this year. So That was Grace and Generosity. Dream Thief and Refusal of the Call was the other one that came out, which I actually thought was really, really interesting. Oh, now they're pointing out we've got threes running through these cards as well. Threes and ones, basically, which is also fascinating. So if threes and ones mean anything to you right off get-go, or you've got something that just dropped in when you hear me say that, awesome. If you don't know, go and Google number 33 or the number 11, because those are, it shows up or twice for each number, sorry. And just take what resonates, what first kind of pops out for you, because you'd be surprised at how well the teams are able to use the internet as well to get you whatever it is that needs to come through. So Dream Thief is interesting because refusal of the call. And again, it seems to be a little bit more of that reference of things feeling too big, too scary, too unsure, not enough certainty to say yes to them or those kinds of things because I can feel like there's a lot of people being like, "Oh, I don't know, it's like something is here. I've had this dream or I've had this idea and I just never felt like I could take action on it." Even if you are feeling more expansive and you are feeling like really good about things, there could still be somewhat of this sort of hesitancy to take action and just do the thing or move or do something to make that energy continue to benefit and move forward. So that's sort of what this is kind of about as well. And it's like the refusal of the call only gets louder as the year goes on, just so you know. So if you continue to resist that, you will find yourself in quite a harsh battle probably within your own mind because your comfort zone is going to want to talk you out of maybe doing it. And the longer that goes on, the more frustration there may come. Okay, so the next card that fell out, and no joke, these all fell out like almost like at the same time. And they were the only ones that were all face up. So deep diver is diving into a task, and they're literally saying, like, if you dive into that task, you will gain clarity because that is how this sort of works. Um, it's like Okay, so they just showed me something kind of interesting. It's like compared to you standing next to the horse, hanging on to the horse's mane per se, and you're both looking out over the valley, you're going to have one perspective, right? And it's going to be very different now than if you're sitting on the top of the horse and you're looking out above the horse's head, and now your perspective is completely changed because you're also higher up, right? But you're also connected as more of like a one rather than two separate individuals or two separate energies trying to kind of navigate the same land, but you both have different perspectives on what that sort of looks like, and so there may be some resistance that starts happening. Whereas following the pull and diving into a task or taking the action or exploring it. They're even like just even allowing yourself to do some research, even allowing yourself to explore an idea in this way, that is taking action. That is movement. That is energy being sort of acted upon. So it's helpful when you kind of go for it because now all of a sudden you do find yourself sitting on top of the horse with the horse and that movement and that energy and that flow starts to really work together rather than maybe two stubborn individuals trying to figure the horse sees it one way and you see it the other and it goes, well, I don't care what you really think, I'm going this way, and you're like, well, I don't care, I'm going this way, and then you get that clash. And that's what they keep coming back to, rock bottom cracked open. Like that is a part of what's happening, is because that resistance is creating this really uncomfortable space. So deep diver diving into the task is going to allow for some more clarity, some ways to move. Oh, and if anybody's watching the video, I'll show you these cards real fast. So this is my cracked open. Trusting the timing called. So if that's the thing is like if you're finding yourself in a space where you're feeling more challenged or you're feeling like, oh man, just know it can change really quick. You're allowed to jump on the horse. You're allowed to start co-creating with this energy of this year at any point in time. And there might be times where, your co-creation feels like it's maybe coming to a halt or a standstill and it's a little uncomfortable again. But this year is a year of expansion. It's not The horse is not going to ask you to continue walking the whole time when she wants to run. There's going to be points and times where there's going to be lulls, there's going to be time for integration, but you have to be able to recognize what is going on and you need to be able to trust yourself and start building that awareness and foundation. It's no joke. This is why I was telling people for the last 2, 3 years to start building awareness, to become really aware of yourself and the energy, because It's only going to help you as the world moves forward. And our entire planet is in ascension mode right now. Our entire freaking planet is in ascension mode. And I've had people ask me, well, why aren't the animals, being affected by this? And I said, they absolutely are. It's just their consciousness and their state of being is different than what we as humans are. So they're maybe in a little bit more of a survival state, which entails them to go along with whatever's sort of happening. They don't have the mindset to fight, whatever might be happening within themselves. They're going to integrate it probably better because they don't have that fight to put up against, they've been giving a set of beliefs and that's all they've been told to believe and now it's being challenged. I mean, that's just not how that works for them, right? So they move better with energy in that state of being and they in that type of consciousness. Whereas for us, we're very challenged in the factor of what we've been told. Our consciousness level, sometimes we get to that point, and again, it's a part of ascension, right? Because when you get to that point to be self-aware, to the degree of being able to actually create a reality like we are, it can be super challenging and it can be really uncomfortable. And so March is sort of really portraying sort of now more of those both sides of that energy and what's available. They just said it's going to be pretty hard to sit in the middle. You're not going to be able to really sit in the middle. You're either going to be, in old earth or you're going to be in the new earth energy. And that's just that. I mean, there's not going to be much of a middle anymore. And if you do feel like you're in the middle, it's probably more or less just you're clashing with yourself at a mindset or the belief system set. And that's why what's probably happening is you're actually flip-flopping probably rather quickly. So it might feel like at times you're in the middle, but you're probably really not. You're just flip-flopping between, that energy. So breathe deep this month. Allow yourself the space and time to be you, and allow yourself to try to get back to a state of more neutral space to help yourself understand whatever might be going on, or to become into a state of mm, acceptance of the current that's always been there, they just said, because it has been. I mean, it's like you trust the plane to fly from the engines that are attached to it. You need to start trusting yourself at a higher level and knowing that there's been a current all along. And the less you stop fighting that current, the easier it'll actually start to become. More trusting in what is already here and what is going on, and this reality shift that starts to happen with New Earth. There's so much more peace that comes with the recognition of this empowerment in self. And yet at the same time, I get it. It's very scary at first for us to even want to accept that inner power and accept that self-empowerment, because for us, the word power in general doesn't always mean the greatest of things. And maybe some of us really haven't had great experiences, whether it be from this lifetime or others, that involved power. Right. So, and that could be on all different levels. So March is sort of portraying this energy of, we've got old earth energy, we've got new earth energy. Which one are you going to decide to be in? Because you still get choice, of course. It might not always feel like you do, but that's where you recognize, like, okay, is this all happening like to me, or are you going to start flipping the script a little bit and being like, why is this happening for me? Because that'll also help loosen up this constrictedness of feeling like you don't have. That's interesting too. They just brought up fate and destiny, so I'll touch on that a little bit too, because that might be where some people feel that a little bit more in March here is like fate and destiny. But you see, like it's not the fact that you're not in control, because you recognize that inner flow has always been there, and maybe it's been your own resistance to change or uncomfortability or not wanting to maybe move in a direction when your oversoul is like, hello, this is what we're here for, right? We're here to move, we're here to grow, we're here to expand. So that kind of leads back into like the fated and the destiny. And so like fated, a fated life, or if you want to say it that way, or a destiny, like it's my destiny, right? To do these things. Fate brings a really detrimental heavy energy because it says it can't be changed. And destiny is very expansive because it sort of allows the space for recognizing your co-creation in a part of the destiny space, right? So that's more of where our natural flow is towards destiny, because we have free will here. We can choose different things. And so that's where you can kind of see maybe that new earth energy really leans more towards the word of the destiny type of lifestyle rather than the fated lifestyle, which is probably more old earth energy, because fate makes you feel like you don't get a choice. Fate makes it feel like it has to happen. some people want to say, well, technically, isn't that fated or fated life when you signed up for it at a higher level? And I'm like, well, no, because destiny, it actually fits destiny better because you're not signing up for exact events to get you to certain things. You've signed up to learn certain things, but what that looks like in that learning process is completely up to us while we're here at a free will level, because that determines on what those events are going to look like. And that's sort of, again, what is March is sort of asking of us is to choose to respond instead of just simply react. And it's very powerful when you choose that for yourself. But again, that's where that power might actually create some fear. And so this frustration kind of comes out of us. And I do feel like it's probably being portrayed mostly in most people as frustration or annoyance. Maybe a little bit of anger here and there, but I don't feel like the anger would be the same as maybe what it was in 25. Um, but again, just like this deep compassion and this different kind of space of anger, I guess that would feel different in the body. It might feel sort of the same anger in the mind, but you'll feel it in the body and it's different. This is a different kind of anger. It's deeper. It's at more of like a cellular level, actually, is what I want to say, which is kind of wild to think about, but at the same point, I get it because there's so much ascension, there's so much shifting, there's so much changing, and we're integrating so much of all the energy that came in 25, and we're still integrating that and then still moving towards, all this energy that the earth is now shifting into as well. So I hope this helps you in some degree for yourself, or maybe it's for people around you. Maybe you feel like you've been pretty good and happy and really excited for things to come. And um, but you're seeing this maybe happening with other people around you or loved ones or friends. And it's not to say that you need to go give them a whole bunch of advice, but this is probably, if they're interested in this stuff, hopefully they'll have heard something that'll help them along the way. But at the same point, this would be probably for you as well to recognize that they're just in old earth energy, and whether they choose to get out of that or not will be their choice. Um, it's not, we're not going to be able to just help people. We can't just pull people over. It just doesn't work like that. They need to be in that vibrational state of being before they're even going to recognize what that new earth energy even is. So, to giving the space and understanding sometimes in your own mind can help create a better environment for those people that are, moving through whatever they're moving through. And that is sometimes enough. It doesn't always have to be conversations. It doesn't always have to be trying to make somebody feel better. Um, a lot of that's not really working anyway, because if you're not really in the old earth energy, recognizing old earth energy only ever wants to validate, the victim mindset. So people are only ever looking for validation. And if it's not validating what they're feeling or what they're thinking in their own minds, they're probably not going to hear it anyway. So creating that space through the energy is going to be more powerful than necessarily using words. Um, Even though that could be frustrating sometimes because I know we've all been taught to use our words to communicate, but communication through energy is way more powerful than anybody even could even realize until you kind of start to do more of it. So use that to your advantage, I guess, and being able to, if you feel like you want to help somebody, do it in the energetic sense. Or, go give some change to somebody that might need it on the street. But at the same point, they said to me too, it's interesting though, because I've had some people be like, well, I know for a fact some of those people that say they're homeless aren't homeless, or they're using it, in a not maybe such a nice way or an intentional way of being, you know, downplaying maybe some people's actual situations. And I've been asked this question. I said, I understand that. I understand that because there are some people that I've seen, and been like, oh, that doesn't feel right. But that's what I said to them. You need to feel the energy because you'll always know somebody's true intentions. Most of them, for 99% of the time, though, really are just in need of help. So as much as it might not seem like, it's going to change their entire situation, you will change that moment of their day into something way more positive than what they have maybe been going through, right? So that's the point of it. You can shift that energy into new earth energy at any point in time if you've got the awareness to do so. And if you don't feel like you have the awareness to do so, then I suggest you start finding that grace and generosity for yourself, because it's probably there, but your expectations of what it might look like could be very different than what it actually is portraying as. Sometimes it's the smallest things that create this incredible, huge impact. And that's sort of where we're starting, right? We start with the small things so that by the time 27 rolls around and by the time these things really start to shift and move in the collective at a higher level, we see it as progress because we recognize that the small things have been counting towards the energy shift and they've been counting towards something better for the entire collective. And if we can do that, then we create a space where we will see it, actually come to fruition. So March is kind of our very first month where it's like really starting to push those edges and push that energy in sort of like a Y, it's shaping off. It's going, it's a Y now. It's got one path over here, another path over here, and I don't see those energies converging again for a very long time, if ever, depending on what kind of, things happen and continue to happen on Earth. So not in our lifetimes, anyway. We're moving into a space where we're not going to see that. And I'm talking for like the next 100, years at least. So it's one of those things to recognize we are in huge shifts at this point. We are in huge things happening. And this month is just really the beginning, I feel like, of where we start to feel and see that more at that physical level as well. So I really hope this helps you in some way. Just again, remembering it's going to taper into April, and then we kind of get into this little bit of a weird mixture between what's sort of happening in March and then kind of the what's going to happen in April with the energy. And I say it feels a little bit weird. It feels like I don't even know how to describe that feeling. It kind of feels like a molasses. When you're trying to dump molasses out of a container and it's like this weird, like, come on and go already. And then it finally comes out and then you can't almost get it to stop. That's sort of what this energy mixture feels like coming into April a little bit. So there'll definitely be a week, probably not the very first week of April. You're probably leaning more towards what's happening here in March. And then the second week is kind of where it'll kind of start to get that weird mixy massy, matchy kind of weirdness happening there. Gooey feeling. Yeah. And it's not gonna necessarily like be super noticeable, but you'll probably actually notice that in your body more than anything, or with time. So or if you feel like you're having conversations with people and you're like, I swear to God, I already had this conversation. Like, what is going on? It'll be things like that that you'll kind of start to realize, oh yeah, there's something really goopy happening here, before we kind of really start getting into April energy. So that's sort of the time frame for this. Again, I hope it helps you in some way. And if you want to get notifications for any time a new podcast episode comes up, please subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to this on, because that is the best way. I don't always make posts about every episode I release. So if you want to have notifications, subscribe. Anyway, I hope you guys have a fabulous day and the rest of the month, and we'll see you on the next one.